Good evening. I call to order the October 2nd, 2017 work session of Swarthmore Borough Council. I notice that all members are present, as is the mayor. I'd like to make a preliminary observation and request. We, in our comfortable community and surroundings, have witnessed from afar a seemingly endless series of natural disasters that have assaulted our fellow citizens on our mainland and island territories, leaving tens of thousands homeless and bereft. Then yesterday, when it seemed that there was no disaster left to befall our fellows, almost 60 of our countrywomen and countrymen were senselessly murdered, and more were wounded by a sniper in Las Vegas. Let us this evening take a moment of silence to hold those who were afflicted there and their loved ones in the light, and to remember all those who continue to suffer the effects of nature's fury. Thank you. Council will, at the conclusion of the regular meeting this evening, have an executive session to consider possible litigation and also personnel matters involving the negotiation of our new contract with our uniformed employees. At this point, we would welcome public comment. If you wish to address us, please come to podium. There used to be a podium.
It's on order.
It shrunk. Any of you who are very short can come forward and stand at that podium. And share with us your name and your street address. Thank you.
My name is Rich Shumko, 445 Riverview Road. And I have a question prior to other people speaking. The last I know, the developer at Springfield South made a counter proposal for the planting plan, and my question is whether you have, Mr. Scott sent a letter in response to that, saying it was not adequate. Have you received a reply from him yet?
I have not I did not receive a written reply. What followed was the borough's landscape architect met with the developer's landscaper, and they came up with an agreed upon planting scheme.
I think I could speak for the neighbors. We're not looking for a compromise here. We would like you to stick to the plan that you originally proposed.
Well, the borough will do what it will do in that regard. Thank you.
So my name is Jonathan Hodgson. I live at 533 Riverview Road. I was up at the corner this afternoon, and I took these pictures, which I apologize for their quality, but the sun was in my eyes, and I'm not very good with my phone. But it is my impression that the trees that have been planted will never grow to an altitude sufficient to provide the kind of buffering that was expected. To make matters worse, the things that would grow highest are arborvitae, so the first time we have a heavy snowfall, maybe not this winter, maybe the next winter, they will be crushed. I know I had some in the back of my garden. So to the extent that the borough can go back and say, look, we had pressure, we feel that the agreement we made was not entirely satisfactory, can you do some more about it?
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Small approaches.
It's somewhat the same topic. My name is Robert Small from 305 Rutgers Avenue. We noticed that the traffic calming procedures had begun, but now have stopped. On both sides of Yale Avenue, between Rutgers and Kenyon Avenues, there are sticks planted in the middle of the bog, surrounded by piles of dirt. Can we find out when the next part will happen? Thank you.
Does the borough manager have any information on this subject?
On Thursday, I had a meeting with the contractor and representatives from PennDOT to once again go over the holdup on the various curb cuts, which have yet to be approved. The preliminary design was approved, the final design was not approved. There are 6 outstanding batches of curb cuts that have not been approved by PennDOT. This is a 4-part approval process. We are only on step 3, but the last 2 are quite quick. So we do anticipate that the work will be completed this month.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Let me, on the subject of that, just a moment, Rick.
Sure.
I had a conversation earlier today with one of the PICO guys who's working on the gas line near Willow Creek. And they we're back, and they're going to have to dig it up again. The new pipe they just planted, one of the new ones itself, is leaking gas, so they have to dig the hole again and do it again. But I told them that to take it as long as they needed to take, because many of my neighbors thought this was an excellent traffic calming effort. Yeah.
So David was referring to the other end, and I think we've consistently said that the traffic calming on the eastern end of Yale Avenue by Swarthmore would be completed. It's a permanent speed hump, and it didn't make any sense to put those in the ground when PICO was going to be digging it up to put in their gas line. They were supposed to do it in June. We had another delayed project. I have told the engineer that that project I thought was done. Apparently now it's not, so I'm sure he will be working on the final design for that soon.
Thank you. Yes, next.
Good evening, Council. Rick Lee, President of the Fire Company.
Robert Edson, Chief of the Fire Department.
Good evening.
Welcome.
Thank you. We are here tonight to talk to you about a possible solution for the dramatic loss of volunteers in the fire company. In July, we were awarded a SAFER grant by the Department of Homeland Security in the amount of $465,840. SAFER stands for the Staffing for Adequate Fire and Emergency Response. This program is designed to protect the health and safety of the public and firefighting personnel against fire and fire-related hazards. This grant will allow us to hire 2 additional employees from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. daily during the time when our diminishing volunteers are out of town at work. FEMA, under the Department of Homeland Security, understands the plight of volunteer fire departments. They understand the financial impact communities are facing as they are transitioning from all volunteer departments to combination departments with both volunteers and paid employees. The SAFER grant provides 75% of the employee costs for the first 2 years and then 35% in the 3rd year, allowing a gradual way to find the funding necessary to support the need for paid personnel. We all understand the financial impact on budgets the transition from volunteers to paid employees will have. The advantage a SAFER grant gives the community is that we can work together towards finding the necessary funding at a graduated level.
So why did we apply for this now? For the past several years, Swarthmore in particular, and fire companies in general, we've seen a sharp decline in volunteer firefighters. Our turnout varies, but we often find ourselves at inadequate staffing levels, especially during working hours. This puts both the public and my firefighters at increased risk. Consistently during the week, the only firefighters on the first arriving apparatus are the 2 on-duty crew, provided they are not already on another emergency medical route. So why do we need increased staffing? Firefighting requires firefighters. Advancing hose lines, raising ladders, and searching for trapped occupants are tasks that need to be undertaken immediately upon arrival. Time affects life. The more quickly tasks can be completed, the better the outcome for everyone. The more firefighters on the scene, the less time it takes to complete these vital tasks. OSHA and NFPA both require a minimum of 4 firefighters to begin an interior operation. Currently, we cannot provide that in a timely manner. Most of our mutual aid companies are in the same predicament as we are, so help is not just around the corner. In our fire response, time is our enemy. The faster we can complete our fire ground tasks, the faster we can provide a safer environment for ourselves and the community we've sworn to protect. The faster the fire goes out, the faster the danger to the occupants goes away. The silver bullet to defeating the issue of time is to have sufficient staff on our apparatus so that we can quickly and effectively accomplish our mission. Thank you.
Thank you. I assume that the Public Safety Committee will be considering its recommendation to council generally on staffing, the financial support that the borough will give to the fire company this year and by implication in future years. And so it's my understanding that the Safer grant assumed when it was made that in fact you were going to have 4 paid people, and council did not know that. So the fact is that whatever decision this council makes in this regard will, to a considerable extent, bind future councils to continue to come up with the money, the matching money that the Safer grant assumes. And so we will be looking for a recommendation in that regard from council, from that committee. I've forgotten the term used when other companies respond as well.
Mutual.
The mutual support provided by this company, presumably other companies, and they to us, arguably is a form of regionalization, which has its own financial benefit. But in any event, council will look forward to the recommendations of the Public Safety Committee in that regard. Any other public comment tonight on any subject? If not, we'll move. Yes, come forward, please. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Marie Kofi, 451 Riverview Road, and
Welcome.
I'm sorry I'm not as prepared. I applaud you for your presentation. I first would like to start with a question, and in the plantings that have been done on the berm at the end of Riverview Road, is the berm itself to be restored at all? The dirt, is it to be built back up to any former level where they took the dirt away?
I have no idea.
Not that I'm aware of, no. Because part of your proposal was to restore the heights according to the original contract.
Well, there was nothing in the contract about height. The word berm's not in the contract. It's about the width of the buffer. I do not, as I recall, the berm peters out as it approaches Baltimore Avenue.
It does, and yeah, it was much higher before they took away some.
And we have nothing to tell you in that regard tonight.
Okay, I would ask that, I have a few more points.
Oh, sure, please.
So I'd like you also to consider then, restoring the berm. There's still problems of the trash pickup at 5:30 on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, which I believe is in violation of those ordinances. There's still a huge hole in the fence that we could all walk through together and still not touch it. And as they say in a famous TV show, winter is coming, and the deer are going to go in there and eat everything.
Which property? Is this all-
Between Mary Hints and that would be the southern border of the fence, that's still there. The gate is still not locked, which is a safety issue. When I read the proposal, and maybe there was an extra step in here of his response to the Denninger property, only 4 trees were presented. Is that still the case? That they were only going to receive 4 trees?
May I respond to this?
Please do, yes.
What
Please
happened-
do.
Okay, no problem. Marie, what happened was, as Bob had said earlier, there was some back and forth with the developer. And our landscape architect went up there and looked when the planting was about to be done. As far as I know, it's been done to her satisfaction. I don't have a definitive answer on that yet. We're going to get an as-built plan from the landscape architect for the developer and then compare the two and have an answer. As you know, I think some of this has been a moving target for a long time, and I think all of us on council, as well as the neighbors, want to finally have an end point to this. So I'm hoping that when we get that as-built plan, we'll be able to tell you what position all of council is taking, and then that will be our answer on the subject.
Because we've tried to present a very united group of people, and hearing the same message would be beneficial to us, so we're not saying, well, what about this and what about that? Because we want to make sure that everybody on the block is taken care of and it doesn't become a personal issue. We're trying to stick together with this. So if we could have a message somehow, maybe an email of what's being done, that would be fantastic.
Well, to your point of not wanting to communicate separately with people, that's why we communicate here, for that very reason, so that different people don't get different emails or misinterpret what the email said. So that's why we communicate here, so
So I look forward to hearing the answers to those questions.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. Anyone else this evening?
My name is Barbara Whitaker Shimko. I'm at 445 Riverview Road. And I'm involved with the developer behind us, and just add my comment of worry about what's happening and going to happen in the future to that neighborhood. At the bottom of Riverview Road, there's a current issue of zoning for a person wanting to do, I guess, what's colloquially called Airbnb, and the zoning on that is quite clear, it seems to me, in Swarthmore, and with the number of large homes we have in this town, seems to me that could come up quite frequently. And I would just urge the council to be supportive to the taxpayers who live here because of the nature of the Swarthmore community, that it doesn't become a different kind of place where different kinds of groups can live. An example is the zoning that was changed for the care of patients from regional hospitals, and that's a very good cause, but we do have those types of facilities in town, and we can, such a small town, can't handle too much of that. So just beware that we're the guys who are footing the bill for the town, and we'd like you to support it.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. By the way, everybody sitting up here is footing the bill for what goes on in town. Anybody else who wish to address us this evening? Thanks. So we'll move on from public comment. The Environment Committee, Laura?
The gazebo in the Little Crum Creek Park is it really needs a new roof, and the public is cautioned to maybe not hang out under the gazebo right now. Actually, if caution tape could be put around it, maybe even. But anyway, the main point is that it really needs a new roof, and so the EAC has gotten some estimates, and that will be a budget item for 2018.
I don't think we can publicly say that it's dangerous and make it an item for not 2017. That's, you can't do that. I mean, we will find the money to do it this year if indeed it is that unsafe.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't.
All right, okay, all right.
We just, as a matter of course, if we find something that dangerous,
Well, that's
and then we
good.
let the
Oh,
public
yeah,
know, we
all
take
right.
care of it right away.
Okay, that's good, all right. But anyway, I just wanted to say that they're in the process of getting estimates. And the other thing is the EAC is soliciting public, suggestions about the fireplace that had to be taken down. And there'll be some surveys going out in several different methods. So look out for those. And just to see, how many people use the fireplace, how they use the park, and to just continue kind of the improvements of Little Crumb Creek Park. And when they get an idea of, they'll get some ideas for what kind of fireplace to make, and we'll present those, and that'll be exciting. And then funding will be pursued on a couple different avenues. So that's really all I have.
Okay, will your committee be meeting this month?
No.
Okay, I know, if I'm not mistaken, there in fact is a working fireplace in the vicinity of the fireplace that no longer exists.
Correct.
And also, the aesthetics are a matter of course, personal taste, but I, for one, think the area where the old fireplace used to be is much improved by its absence. But that I recognize everybody feels about these things the way they do. Finance Committee.
Yes, thank you, David. First of all, the Finance Committee will be meeting on Monday, October 23rd at 7:30 a.m. And then I do have, that was prepared by Jane and I, what I would call a preliminary budget. This was not vetted by the Finance Committee. We will in the next meeting. But we wanted to put out something so that we can start considering some of the requests we've gotten and sort of have an open discussion, and then we can take that into consideration in the Finance Committee at the end of this month. But I just wanted to highlight a couple of things for those who looked at it. And really, it's probably worthwhile for me to focus on the written parts that Jane put together, as opposed to the actual line items, but we can certainly talk about those. Again, this is extremely preliminary. I think one of the key points is if you look at the middle of page 1 of the written page, one of the things that we've come to realize is in terms of best practices is that recycling fees for nearly all other boroughs and townships is in their general fund and not in the trash collection fee. So one of the things that we want to do is to follow those best practices and move those fees under general taxable accounts. What that means from a practical standpoint is really just shifting our sewer fees down and our tax up, the net, with the final bill for the taxpayer being the same. So that's one change that may look, at least on the cover, that the millage is going up, but in reality your fees are coming down. So again, that's a change that is worth highlighting. Obviously it's not final, but that's what we've decided we want to put together, and obviously the Finance Committee will vet that some more, and then we'll bring it back for final consideration, but we want everyone to know that we're considering that. The other things that went into this particular budget are really very much baseline as to what we received last year in terms of revenues. We did assume a 3% cost of living increase for all employees. Again, that's just a very general number. And we did factor in the police department at 8 full-time officers, which again is preliminary based on other discussions. And obviously we have ongoing negotiations with the police, so that will impact those first 2 bullet points. We did factor in a change that we're considering and likely to implement in terms of the health care plan. And we can get into more detail on that, but I think ultimately it's going to save the borough money, and we think it's also a plan we think is better. So it's a very productive change potentially. And then in terms of things like budget for street paving, we kept that the same. Capital accounts, that what we contribute, kept the same. We kept all the borough organizations funded at the same level as last year. And we assumed the same other fees and taxes as already discussed. And that nets us a $21,000 surplus, which is essentially immaterial, so it's really a balanced budget from that point of view. And if you look at the second page, you can see some of the requests that have been put in for the various organizations that seek funding from the borough. And finally, there's some parts at the bottom about our reserve funds, where they are now, and that ties into what we've given to them in the past. So really, I'm not going to spend any more time on it, but I wanted everyone to be aware, and happy to take any questions as it relates to any of those assumptions that we put in.
I have a question,
Yeah.
but it might relate more to it, well, it does, to a line item, so if now's not the time to ask that.
That's
Okay. Item number 8, the planning, zoning, and code enforcement budget. I noticed that's up almost 18%, and I just wondered what that was for.
It's,
What page?
I'm sorry, it's an expense account, yeah. The biggest increase in there, it's actually a small number, so a small increase in funding. It's planning, zoning, and code enforcement. Our code enforcement, there's a lot going on at the college right now. Quite a few buildings are in review, and that's the line item that includes our building inspector, our outside building inspector. So I think that went from 20 to 25,000. So that $5,000 accounts for quite a bit of that. Also, there was a slight increase this year, which actually I didn't budget for, but should have, in the fee for the zoning hearing board solicitor. So again, minor increases, $1,000, $2,000 has a big effect on that budget because it's so small. But those are the two major items.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Michael?
Yes. So if we were to increase the community organization payments or new ones, that would reduce the reserve, basically?
Well, it could potentially put us into a deficit, and theoretically we would take from the fund balance. That's the other thing. The other part that I left out is that again, this is a projection, but we're projecting 510,000 would be the ending fund balance in the general fund at the end of this year, which is at the high end, as pointed out here, between 5 and 10% of revenues is kind of a guidepost. So
Yes.
there's that to consider as well. It could come from that in theory. It could, again, a lot of these other things, particularly as it relates to healthcare and police, are very much in flux. So a lot of those things may be changing higher or lower depending on how things go. So this is very, again, preliminary. So I think there's all those factors are going to weigh on that. But that's kind of how we had to start somewhere. And so we left those particular requests out, not knowing where they would go.
As to any item, moving it up or down either, and granting more money to the community organizations that have requested it, changing anything, you don't know until the song is sung whether you're going to do that by taking advantage of a fund balance if you think it's maybe marginally greater than it need be, to raise tax, or to lower some other account in the budget to produce the money. So it's too early today, I think, to say where any amount of money on any line in the budget is going and how it would impact any other line in the budget.
And I also think it's important to note that the borough is in good financial position. But we obviously have to consider, as David mentioned before, it relates to the fire department. I think it relates to everything else, which is not just this particular year, but what levels of funding does that mean for the future? Sort of factoring that in, that our budgetary position may not be as great in year 2, 3, 4, 5. And so I think that's another factor that we'll have to work on.
And the only good thing is this is the last Swarthmore Borough budget that I myself will have anything to do with. Is that it, Michael?
That is it.
Okay. General government.
Okay, so we will be meeting on Monday, October 16 at 7:30 p.m. The agenda will be the budget requests of the community organizations. That's the Senior Citizens Association, the Town Center, the Public Library, and the Community Center. We had our meeting on September 18, and at that meeting, Anita Barrett, who is the coordinator for Town Center, reported we have new lamppost banners in town, new winter plant containers. There have been efforts to spruce up the town. The farmer's market this year hit a record of 800 visitors in 1 hour, which was a record for the farmer's market. So the farmer's market has done well. We have the Fine Arts and Crafts Festival on the 23rd. We have a new business that's opened in town, Blonde Sugar and Honey, which sells home decor items. There was a report by Amber Osborne, who runs the library. They had 20 to 25 teen tech tutors who trained seniors on phones, laptops, and iPads. They had a lecture series on the greatest paintings, and they opened the new Senior Info Center in Borough Hall and helped do the research on the Time Bank project, which is of interest to the seniors. Linton Stables, who's the head of the Senior Citizens Association, reported on their efforts, and that association has taken on a leadership role on implementing the Aging in Place recommendations, which is very good. And the Senior Citizens Association has not requested funding from the town for at least 10 years, and they are requesting funding this year in connection with stepping up to this new role. They're very interested in Time Bank, and they have committed to a senior wellness fair that will take place at the College Inn where they've rented. They're going to be renting out all of the public spaces in the College Inn on March 24, 2018. So that's a big item for them and for the town. And Sharon Mester, who's running Town Center, spoke about their efforts to get new seasonal holiday banners and decorations and spruce up the town for the holiday season. And there's some exciting things Town Center is planning for the holiday season, which I'm not going to mention, but they'll be letting people know about those. And our committee thanked all these various people who are volunteering. Anita Barrett, Sharon Mester, Lynn Stables, Amber Osborne, Jeff Anderson at the Community Center for their leadership and efforts, because the town doesn't function without all the volunteers. I want to mention that we have this new process that council approved about town events and road closures, which I think is working well. Jane, I think you probably think that's working well. But I'll note that there's a growing number of road and lot closures. They seem to be coming fast and furious. So the good news is we've got lots of stuff going on in town. The bad news is we're closing a lot of roads and limiting parking. And so that's kind of a new thing that's facing us now. We're keeping track of that. And we have this new process where the permits come to Jane, and then they also come to me. They go to the police and fire and everybody. So you'll probably be hearing from us at some point about that, and from the committee about the progress on that. I want to mention also that Senior Citizens Association is working hard on getting Swarthmore designated as an age-friendly community by the AARP. And they're having some progress in that. They don't have some announcements to make in the future about that. That's it for our committee.
Okay, thank you. And I should say publicly that neither Ross's committee nor Town Center has anything to do with when and how Santa Claus arises. Rumor to the contrary. Planning and zoning.
Thank you. Our committee will be meeting this month on Thursday, October 26th at 7:30 p.m. in this room. And our committee met last month primarily for the purpose of, I'm going to back up a little bit. The zoning hearing board did hold a hearing on the application for the bed and breakfast for 207 Riverview Road. That hearing was held on Tuesday, the 26th. It went on for 2.5 hours. Both sides were represented by counsel. In lieu of closing arguments, the attorneys and the board agreed that they would submit briefs after they received the record from the court reporters. So when the zoning hearing board meets this month on October 24th, they are hoping at the beginning of that hearing to announce their decision on the bed and breakfast. They do have 45 days though, and that's actually shorter than the 45-day period. So if they're not quite ready to announce the decision, they do have, I think it's till November 10th. So I just wanted to give a report on that It's because somebody mentioned it in the public comment that the zoning hearing board will be giving a decision on that soon. And then the other matter that will be coming before the zoning hearing board on the 24th of October is a request for a variance that has come in, and it's being requested by the co-op for a new sign. And when we had our committee meeting a week ago, the Planning and Zoning Committee, a representative from the co-op came in to talk to us about this application and to explain to us what they were looking for. I'm going to pass this around so the council can see. If you're familiar, the sign on the co-op right now is sort of up at the tippy top of that fence, and they want to bring it down to where it appears on this drawing. So the variance is needed because you're not supposed to have a sign that is any lower than 16 feet above the ground, and you're also not supposed to have a sign that is above the lintel. Another word I had to look up. Above the lintel of the lowest window on the highest window on the ground floor. So I think the co-op is trying to make sure before they go to the zoning hearing board meeting that council is comfortable with them requesting this. And after discussing it, Lauren and I were both present and Jane was at the committee meeting. We do feel comfortable with the request because the co-op is sort of a unique building where it really has almost an all-glass facade, and if they're not allowed to put that sign where they like to put it as shown in that drawing, they would have to move it down and it would completely cover that window that's right beneath where the sign is on the drawing. And then that would really just, block the light inside the store. And this is something they've been working on for a while. I did ask if they've expended any money on this sign, and they haven't yet, but they've expended time and effort. And I think that in this particular instance, because of the way the building is shaped and the fact that it's all glass, it's not asking too much. We didn't think as a committee.
Anybody else have any thoughts or questions?
It's the same sign, but just moving it down.
No, it's going to be bigger.
It's bigger.
It's a bigger sign because I think the sign right now is an oval. It fits up in an oval up there, and this sign will be, I think the dimensions are...
Are the dimensions within the new signage?
Yes.
The dimensions are, it's the height, and it's this sitting on this
They're the
sill.
only two. Okay.
That's correct, just those two. It's a nice looking sign.
Is there a suspicion that people don't know it's there?
Yes, there is.
Oh yeah, people ask where's the
Yes, that's exactly it. And they are really trying to increase their visibility, and they really think that this sign is necessary. It's a hardship without it.
People who can see the building ask where it is.
Well, but the current sign right now is in a very strange place.
very high
It's
up
on
and it's
this-
kind of small.
It's up on that little kind of fence thing that goes around. It's not where you would necessarily look.
You could also bring groceries instead.
Well, I don't know.
Thanks for the suggestion.
But anyway, thank you.
I
have one question?
Oh, sure. There's Manisha.
question.
So is this procedurally, is this something where either the committee or the council could communicate a view to the zoning hearing board?
Yes.
Either before or after, and how's the timing of that work?
That is correct. So what the procedure would be is if the council had a view, one way or the other, or maybe three ways, neutral, we were in favor of this, or we really want the zoning hearing board to enforce our ordinance as written. We feel strongly about that. Then a representative of council would go to the zoning board meeting and essentially testify and say, this is what council wants. We would tell the zoning board what we think. That's how that would work. And that's on the 24th of this month.
And there's a fourth alternative, is to say nothing at all.
Well, I think that was in my three alternatives.
Oh, was it? Was that
might-
your first
It may not have
alternative?
been.
That was number two.
Neutral, I'm sorry, it wasn't clear.
I think I was listening. What I said, I think I was listening, Mary, I apologize.
Been so many years,
I
probably
know,
knows.
can't remember. I think I added something at the planning and zoning meeting. The council doesn't usually go and say, we think you should vote this way. But sometimes the zoning hearing board struggles a little bit with intent. And what was the intent of the zoning ordinance? Does council feel that a particular variance would or would not violate the intent. So for instance, the fence ordinance, I think council has gone and said, our intent is to not have fences, and we would, this particular application, one before us now, would in fact not be welcome. So this wasn't so much going and telling a quasi-judicial body what to do, but to offer some help in terms of how council would view it in light of the relatively new sign ordinance.
And did the committee have a view about whether such intent should be expressed?
Well, after conferring with Jane during the committee meeting, because I admitted I was not on the council, and I know you weren't either when that ordinance was passed, the intent seemed to be to not have, Jane, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't the intent to have certain buildings that were maybe had less of a glass facade, not to have a sign such as that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we had some signs go up sort of in between the first and second story windows and above awnings, that's a third slight variance that they need, that were immediately noted as being unattractive and out of place with the character of the town. So those were addressed in the new ordinance.
Well, at next week's meeting, will you be asking us to do anything in this regard?
I wasn't planning to, but I'll ask Ross, are you asking us to take a position?
I would be amenable to a motion.
Okay.
At next week's meeting?
At next week's meeting.
I'll put it on the agenda.
Legislative session.
Okay, thank you. All right, and the only other thing I wanted to mention is the Planning Commission met, and they are still talking about the Aging in Place Task Force report, and we're hoping to wrap that up soon.
Another thing that I don't have to worry about.
That's right. You do.
3 months from now.
I'm doing all worrying for you. Yes.
They're dropping like flies.
Oh, stop.
Will your committee be meeting this
Yes,
month?
we will,
Okay,
on
thank
the
you.
26th. Thank you.
Now, this week, I'm going to have public safety before public works. Is that okay?
You don't have to.
No.
It's not required.
Yes, it is. Agenda says so.
Okay, thank you. The Public Safety Committee will meet this month on Tuesday, the 17th at 7:30 p.m. in this room. We met last month on the 19th of September. It was a long meeting. I don't think, given things we got to talk about tonight, I'm not going to go over everything, but I will mention a few things. First, with respect to the new collective bargaining agreement that we are in the midst of negotiating with the police department, just let everybody know we're in the midst of negotiating that, and things are progressing. We are discussing topics of interest, and we're also gathering more information. And I think that's probably all I want to say about that at this point. One other thing to mention is that the Civil Service Commission of the Borough of Swarthmore will be conducting a competitive examination for the position of police officer on January 6, 2018 at 8 a.m. at Swarthmore College.
Was it January 6th?
Sorry?
What was the date?
January 6th.
January 6th.
Yeah, January 6th. 8 a.m. And it'll be at a classroom in the college. I'm not sure. Probably in the Science Center, but I'm not sure. All right. As far as the budget requests go, we got a very incomplete budget request from the police department for obvious reasons. So, really nothing to talk about there. The big item, and it's something that's going to require discussion, I am sure, is the Swarthmore Fire and Protective Association's budget request for 2018. And following on what we heard during public comment, it goes beyond 2018, and it's connected to the SAFER grant. So let me try to just explain it very briefly, if I can. So the SAFER grant was to provide funding for 4 full-time equivalent persons. Right now, the fire department has 2 full-time equivalent. So this would take it would take it from 2 to 4 and provide funding for those 4. The way the grant is set up in 2018, this coming year, the SAFER grant would pay towards that end $116,460. The total obligation to pay for those 4 full-time equivalents is $155,280, which means the borough's additional contribution for 2018, just in terms of the SAFER grant, would be $38,820. It would be the same situation exactly in 2019. And then in 2020, remember during public comment we heard that it goes from the grants contribution goes from 75% to 35% of this total amount, $155,271. So in 2020, the grant funding would drop from $116,460 to $54,348, which would require the borough to make a concomitant increase in its contribution from $38,820 to $100,923. After 2020, that is to say, beginning with 2020, with 2021 and onward, assuming, of course, that the department maintained these 4 full-time equivalents, the borough would be responsible for the borough would be asked to make a contribution to pay for the entire amount, which, as I said before, is $155,271. So, in its simplest terms, what the SAFER grant means is that for 2018 and 2019, the borough's contribution each of those years would be $38,820. In 2020, the borough's, so that's 3 years from now, 2 years from now, the contribution would go up to $100,923, and then afterwards the borough would be responsible for the entire amount. That presents an issue not only for the 2018 budget.
Am I correct that the amounts you mentioned
Yes.
are in addition to the amount we're already contributing?
That is correct. That is correct. And so the thing to keep in mind here is that we're not only talking about next year, but we're talking about the future beyond that, provided that the fire department kept the 4 full-time equivalents. It didn't drop back to 2, or there are other possibilities, obviously. So that's the general landscape. We had a long discussion about this at the Public Safety Committee meeting. To be honest with you, we weren't able, after that one session, to come up with a recommendation. And I think you can understand why. This would be a big change. And it has ramifications that are not only short-term, but long-term. And therefore, I think the committee also felt that, if tasked with coming up with a recommendation, we could certainly do that after, I would say, at least one more meeting. But this is such a sizable change that it also seemed right to us to bring it to council as soon as we could, to kind of get the ball rolling, or at least to get everyone on council to be thinking about this.
Okay, thank you. It's an existential issue.
It is an existential issue, and I want to come back to the 2 versus 4 thing. So, that was really an honest misunderstanding, because we were under the impression, the Public Safety Committee, and I think council as a whole was under the impression that the SAFER grant was taken out to fund the existing configuration of 2 full-time equivalents. But in fact, the request was to increase the 2 to 4. And not without reason. I think we heard a little bit, and by the way, there's another public comment period give you guys a chance to respond, but we heard a little bit about how, and we all know this to be true, that the number of volunteers is continually decreasing. And look, let's also be honest, many of the current volunteers, I hate to say this, but they're beginning to age out. So this is a problem that's not going to go away. And then the 4 versus the 2, that's a really good question, like why 4? We had 2 before, now they want to have 4. Well, this is to bring the department up to the recommended guidelines, which you guys mentioned briefly, which has to do with not only with the safety of the firefighters themselves, who are there responding to a fire emergency, but also has to do with the effectiveness of fighting the fire, et cetera, and with the safety of everyone involved. So, but that's the root of the misunderstanding about is this 2, this is 4, that's how that happened. But really, going forward, the issue is, what are we going to do about this? Because this is something that, 38,820 is a big enough increase, but then when you go to 100 and then to 178, or sorry, 155, and you're looking at that sort of out, in a long time horizon, then you begin to wonder. We've had these discussions, by the way, David will remember forever. I've been on council for almost 6 years now, almost 8 for you. And ever since I've been around, we've been talking about this issue, and you can see it on the horizon, and it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And, I think probably a lot of our fellow citizens, our fellow Swarthmoreans, probably many people think that, oh, well, fire protection, ambulance service, we pay taxes, and the taxes are paying for it. Well, beyond the amount of the borough's contribution that the borough makes every year, and that amount has been increasing. And that amount, by the way, does not by any means, we all know, come close to even fully funding the fire department. We're not paying for it with taxes. And the fact that it had been a volunteer department for so many years, and again, we've talked about this before, this is not unique to Swarthmore. It's not unique to Delaware County, not unique to Pennsylvania. This problem's happening all over the country. I think people lose sight of the fact that when you have what had been at one time essentially an all-volunteer force, that's no longer the case and becoming increasingly less the case every year. Something's got to give. And either this council or maybe future councils are going to have to decide what has to give. People have talked about regionalization, consolidation of departments and all that, but to be honest with you, I think until things change at the county level and perhaps in Harrisburg at the state level, I don't think we should be holding our breath for that to happen. Again, I say all of that not because the committee is prepared to make a recommendation tonight, but just to sort of set the table for you guys to be thinking about how we're going to respond to this, both in the short term and in the long term.
Anybody have any thoughts on that?
And I'll just say one more thing about possible sources. If council were to decide, for example, that this is a service that we wanted to make sure we continue to provide to the citizens of the borough, here in the borough from the Swarthmore Fire Station, probably realistically speaking, we'd have to start thinking about ways to fund that. It could be funded from the general fund, probably would require a tax increase. We could institute a special fire tax. So taxes would be one way to do it if council made the decision that that was something it wanted to do. There may be other ways as well. The fire company, of course, makes every effort to raise money. We all get those mailers every year, I think probably twice a year from the Swarthmore Fire and Protective Association. I've seen the statistics. There are not a lot of people that contribute. Again, maybe on the assumption that their tax dollars are already paying for it. They're not. Their tax dollars aren't paying for it. So anyway, these are things that we're going to, only to a certain extent, change.
Right.
A little bit, not the whole nut. So that's something that we simply just have to, at some point, someone's going to have to grab the bull by the horns and make a decision about this. That's all I got.
Okay. You will be meeting, you said, this month?
Yes, we will. Yes.
I, for one, will be interested in hearing. And I've had constituents observe that if there's anything like a significant fire activity in town, that not only the Swarthmore Company arrived, but almost momentarily Springfield arrives, South Media arrives, and others. And so I think rightly or wrongly, there are constituents who feel that in fact we have the mutual assistance arrangement that exists among companies backup, which is moments away. What we don't know, and what our constituents don't know, is whether all those other companies are in the same pickle that we're in. And so, how long will it be possible for them to provide the mutual assistance? Unfortunately, however, it's my understanding that if the company uses $1 of the SAFER grant, that in effect we've committed to that whole 4 years of increasing contributions. So it's not as if we can say we'll do it this year, but next year we don't think so, if the SAFER grant has been accepted. So that in whatever decision council makes in this regard in this year has a significant effect on at least the next 4 years, while who knows what's going to be happening with the condition of the other companies whose assistance we benefit from, as they in fact benefit from ours. Okay, but I can understand why your committee feels like, I view your committee as basically, the benefit you provide to council is a fact-finding. Ask the questions that we would ask if we were sitting in the room with you and getting the information, so that when the time comes for us to deliberate, we have as much useful information as is available to be had, recognizing it's a certain crystal ball operation. Thank you very much. Public Works.
Thank you, David. We did not meet last month, so I don't have any report. We will meet this month on the 26th at 8:30 a.m. here. A couple things to note just on the budget, that preliminary budget Michael discussed. The Public Works, one of their main pickup trucks could probably hang classic tags on it, which is a 19-year-old vehicle. And that's kind of its end of its life. So as part of our, I think, 10-year plan, fiscal plan, it's due to be replaced the following year, 2019. But Cuzzy's recommendation would be to move that out a year. It's $45,000, so that's why I'm talking about it. It's a significant amount of money. So we'll talk about that this month. SRA will appear before us to talk about their budget request. I don't anticipate them asking for any more than they did last year, so that should stay the same. I am proud to announce that our street paving schedule is up and on the borough website. So it is this week, and I won't list all the streets, but if you go to the borough website, the streets are on there. There's no parking on the street, so we can pave it.
Does the borough manager remember the streets?
I have them in front of me.
Well, then, let me just, because I'm curious too about what streets they end up being.
The 300 block of Cornell, University Place, near and dear to my heart, Michigan Avenue, between Marietta and Bryn Mawr.
Has that sewer line been replaced?
It has.
That's good.
Lord, was that loud for 2 days. Strathaven, between Chester and Rutgers. They went very late. Apparently it was a very difficult operation. So into the wee hours of the early evening. Strathaven, between Chester and Rutgers. South Princeton Avenue, between Lafayette Park. Wesley Road, between Swarthmore Ave and Woodbrook and Yale Square.
Okay, great. Good job.
That's all I have.
Okay, and you, as you say, you will be meeting.
We will meet this one.
Any other business anybody wishes to bring before us this evening? Mayor?
So, apparently I have one function like this.
Keep kicking this one.
It's a cost-saving measure by state. And the borough manager was here at the time, I should note that.
Actually, these were replaced by Susan Smythe.
She was here before there were microphones.
That's right.
I just wanted to remind people that the co-op is having their 80th anniversary dinner this Saturday. I think it's a pig roast among other things. I think there are still tickets available. So they're going to, my understanding is they're going to close off Lincoln Way and set up tables and have a street party in front of the co-op. I'm sure everybody has seen, or hopefully people have seen the emails and postings from the co-op about their financial status and sort of the issues that they've been having. And it seems like there's now a plea out for new additional members, which is, I've been a member since we moved here, which I find very gratifying. So I just wanted to get that out there. And then for on your calendars coming up in the future, there's the SRA Oktoberfest coming up towards the end of the month. And my understanding is that that's going to benefit the basketball courts over at behind SRS. So another thing is really good for the borough.
There's 2 Oktoberfests in the borough.
2, okay. On the same day or?
No, the co-op is having an Oktoberfest the weekend before.
On the 21st?
On the 21st. Also on Lincoln Way.
Okay.
So they're going to...
Hard to keep track of all the
I'll
goings and comings.
be drinking in town.
Okay. Should not the public comment be after the borough manager? Borough manager, I mean, that's a good idea.
No,
Or no?
it's usually like this.
Another business is in twice? Oh, that's
good.
Okay, so I'm at a loss to know what to talk, we'll recognize public comment at this point, if anybody wishes to share anything with us beyond what's already been said.
Jonathan Hodgson, 533 Riverview Road. I do have a comment about the nature of these proceedings. Sometimes it's kind of difficult to follow because there's data that you don't share with us. So let me just ask one question, Mr. Craven. If we had to impose a tax increase to pay for the entire cost, what proportion of the current tax would it represent? What percentage would it be?
We discussed that only in the most kind of general terms. I'm kind of hesitant to give it, well...
probably about 6 or 7% in total.
Right, it would be, but that's a rough,
rough.
that's a very rough
It's a
estimate.
rough figure. I want to know whether it was 6 or 1.
It's closer to 6 than to 1.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I just feel it would be kind of helpful if sometimes you guys were a little more forthcoming about things.
Oh, we're not trying to hide the ball.
No,
It's just that this is a moving target, and we're still in the middle of discussing it. Yeah.
You give us an idea of what
Yeah.
the parameters might be from
Yeah.
sort of the worst to the best.
Absolutely, thank you.
David?
Yeah.
I'll also comment to the gentleman, it does help sometimes, if you want to, you can come to the committee meeting, because you'll definitely get a lot of information from the committee meeting.
Just without, if that question was regarded with respect to fire services? Is that
That's what he asked, yeah.
But without at this point putting a percentage to it, if we came to the point that we would have a totally paid fire department, it would have a major impact on the budget of the borough.
Major.
Jane, do you want to talk about the 2018?
Yeah, we have one more.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm short. Susan Kelly, 339 Vassar Avenue. At your meeting last month, you all agreed on the letter that was going to be sent to the Trust for Public Land And I want to thank you from the AC for that. But I'd also like to find out at what stage is this now? It was to be submitted to Stacy McCormick, in that she wanted to have it for to present to the William Penn Foundation when she was meeting with them.
I signed the letter. I have no idea where it went to after that. I
I believe Elise was in touch with, well, I don't think we were ever given direction on where it was supposed to go.
That's what I was looking for. Okay, well, thank you. We'll track it down.
Are you going to do that? You want to do that?
Yeah, we'll track it down.
We want to send the letter, and we just need to know who to send it
Great,
to.
okay. Yeah, there was an address on there to Stacy McCormick on the letter, so we can talk about that later. But anyway, thank you all for signing it anyway.
Thank you. Sure. Okay. Anybody else? Jane, the tree removal contract?
And this is the same removal contract. For those who don't know, we go into an annual contract so that as street trees die, a member of the tree committee, 99.9% of the time, Charles Preston, who's donated hours and hours of his time, goes out, verifies the tree is dead, we figure out how big it is, and we have an agreed upon price to remove trees of various caliber sizes. So we normally go out to bid once a year. That will be on the agenda, and then we'll accept those bids next month. Not on this agenda, but next I will be forwarding a copy of resolution authorizing the council president and vice president to sign the master casting agreement with PennDOT, which we do about every 10 years. And it's the agreement that we will pay PennDOT if they have to raise our utilities when they're paving streets, which it means that the manholes don't get buried, but they get raised up appropriately, and they always give us a good price. But it means that can happen pretty much automatically. We're actually not in line right now. We haven't had a state road paved in several years, but we will. So that will be on the agenda for next week. And since we have we have reporters here from both the Swarthmore and the Daily Times, I would like to note, I didn't bring them with them, but I'll bring them to show you in a minute if you can stick around. The Bates Award, and somebody else was going to mention that, the mayor as the architect, Catania Engineering as the engineer, the Centennial Foundation got a plaque for all of their fundraising, and then the borough got a plaque as well, which we will put over there. On the wall for the design of Central Park, which was really fun. And Mr. Grove came along as well for the presentation.
It was in the Swarthmore.
It was in the Swarthmorian.
In my list.
And,
I didn't trust it.
but I don't know if it was in the I don't think it was in the Daily Times, so I thought I would mention it again. And also last week I went to the annual meeting of the borough's Workers' Compensation Trust, and the borough was awarded a certificate for the top 5% of participants in the trust in terms of safety, which is a tribute to the police department and the public works department, which you can guess have the most accident possibilities and probabilities. So really great job by them, and I will bring a copy of the award if anyone would like to put that in the paper as well, because it's really hard to keep your accidents down. And of course we see it, taxpayers see the benefits. If people don't know, you're totally experience related for workers' compensation. So if your employees aren't doing well, you pay a lot more money. And if they're doing well, you save money. And that's where we are right now. So I think the police chief and our public works director really deserve a lot of thanks.
Okay, thank you. Solicitor Bob?
Thank you. Kind of expanding on what the mayor was talking about today, the borough received a letter from the co-op requesting, and this letter has gone to 160 property owners in the borough, about a deed restriction that is on every parcel in the larger parcel out of which the co-op was developed. They're seeking to have a deed restriction prohibiting the sale of liquor lifted, and they're asking for the borough as the owner of property within this tract to sign a release to do so. And this is a potential litigation matter, so I'm going to suggest we discuss it in executive session further.
Okay, thank you.
And I just would let you know 160 other property owners in the borough received a similar letter. So,
Okay, we can discuss it later. And that's it for you?
yes.
Thank you. We will now adjourn into executive session. Thank you all for coming tonight.